Welcome to Financially Savvy in 20 Minutes, a podcast hosted by international award-winning author, two-time TEDx speaker and investor, Natalie Torres Haddad. She will share the tips and tricks from interviews with self-made entrepreneurs, leaders, and those who have attained financial freedom while learning financial literacy.
All right. Hello. Welcome to Financially Savvy in 20 Minutes. It is definitely a podcast to give you some tips and tricks and really just how to cope what we're doing through a pandemic. Today's episode, I am co-hosting with someone that I admire very much. She is not only a like-minded individual, but it's always funny how we cross paths with people that know our story because they've either lived it through their own experience or obviously are empathetic to what we're going through. So for me, it's always a pleasure to get to know other people that not only have a similar mission, but also want to help and educate others along this path. And she will be helping me with some really cool episodes that we have coming up with some people that I've admired for a very long time. And an added bonus is, she's bilingual, trilingual, really. And I think that's something that's always impressive. And being a podcast where you have both languages is always a plus, at least more than one, right?
Yeah.
So Vira Egli grew up in LA and graduated from LMU, Loyola Marymount University. She is a co-founder of the Why Story, where she helps entrepreneurs build purposeful businesses. And she's also spent the last 15 years in the insurance industry and also currently co-hosts a podcast called Talk Insurance to Me, which basically highlights other inspiring professionals in her industry. She has lived in China, Switzerland, and recently ditched LA and moved to the mountains, which we just had a recent hike. I think she was the first person I saw out of this quarantine that everybody feels like we're going through. And so we'll talk a little bit about it. But first, I'd like to welcome and just ask you, ¿Cómo allez-vous, Vira?
Très bien, merci. Et toi?
Comme si, comme ça.
Ah ouais.
This is the truth of it, right?
Yeah,
Throw in
absolutely.
a little French here and there. But yeah, it's so funny. You and I had this conversation. We met over a year ago. It's almost a year, and
Yeah.
and actually in person, and we had mutually known each other virtually. And the funny thing is, I told her, I'd love to have more, other languages, specifically people that have traveled and lived in other countries as well. And the moment I told her I actually want to pick up speaking French again because it's been more than a decade when I was speaking French. And I told her about this little place in France called where?
Okay.
Montpellier.
Montpellier.
Montpellier. It's south of France. Most people have no idea where this is. It's basically, if you're from California, it's like a little Santa Barbara. You have to know
Yeah.
to live there. But what did you tell me, which made me just crack up?
First of all, I was just like, this is a sign because what? Like nobody knows that place. It's definitely like a local type of thing, So first of all, when you said that you asked the universe for somebody that speaks French, and then you mentioned you studied in Montpellier, I was like, okay, made to be.
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
my husband's family lives there, so yeah.
Yeah, so I felt the same. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm all about asking the universe for different aspects. And I think it's funny. And you and I met at our last year, which this year is coming up, November 20th, our second annual Make Money Moves with Millionaires. And you came all the way out for our first event, which was so inspiring, right? I mean,
It
I'm
was,
still like in awe that
it
happened.
was.
And that was the first time we actually got to meet. And we have a mutual friend too, someone that's very dear to me that I've known since pretty much my entire childhood. So I thought it was just kind of a kismet or whatever might call it, serendipitous way to talk about it. So I love Vera too because not only because she's a worldly person, I think that's something that allows us to see different perspectives when it comes to how we invest, how we manage our money. Being homeowners, being Latinas, things like that, it makes it a little bit different for other people to understand that there's a whole different background to what takes us to get to where we are today, right?
Absolutely, yeah, and it's almost, I don't know, I'm always in shock that I'm a homeowner, that I am Latina, and I was able to do it because you read all these statistics, even when you're a kid, and you're like, I don't want to be that statistic. I
Right.
actually want to stand out and be something or someone and have things and crack generational barriers. So
Yes, and
yeah,
it's that I always say it's the positive statistic, right? We want to be
right.
our own if we're going to be put into one. And
Exactly.
you're right on. It's kind of like there's moments where I pinch myself. I'm like, how did this happen? And
Yeah.
I think that's when it's important to start sharing our stories because it doesn't matter where you're from, but I think that's something that people need to see, having some of those other perspectives from other parts of the world. And speaking of tomorrow, which is well, this is actually going to be posted later on, but 10/31 is most people
Mm.
know it as Halloween or Hallows Eve, depending where you're celebrating.
Right.
It's actually World Savings Day, and for the US, that's one of the things I'm always talking about financial literacy and advocating it. But majority of people in the US don't know what World Savings Days is because they're not celebrating the way they do in Europe. It's all over
Hmm.
the world. It's not necessarily a bank day, but it's a day where it's literally teaching and talking about how we should save, right? And for you, maybe you can share a little bit about your story because um, you live in a beautiful, yes, mountain area, but affluent as well. And I think that's something that a lot of people, when they're thinking about, let's say, investing in real estate, they're, I know for me, it's overwhelming to think that you could ever have enough money for a down payment, let
Hmm.
alone, be able to keep those mortgage payments up. And how would you say mortgage in French?
Hypothèque.
Hypothec, yes. The first time I remember hearing that, I was like, oh, it sounds like Spanish, hipoteca.
Yeah.
So,
Hipoteca. Exactly.
right. So it's like learning these languages of other, it really combines how small our world really is. 'Cause it's
It
so,
really bonds all of us. It bonds us,
yeah,
We all have the same concerns and the same freakouts, and every culture has this thing where I think fear or misunderstanding of money is just it breaks culture barriers down. Everyone has it.
yeah.
So
And so how'd you start your journey? Because I know you were pretty much first in your family to be doing this too.
yes, first generation, first going to college, first, a lot of firsts. So I have to say, I don't know. It's just since I was a kid, I always had this belief of everyone should live life according to how they want to, right? So I never really did anything traditional in terms of like my family's Mexican. My parents grew up in the US. They weren't born here, but they came like a lot of kids. It wasn't their choice. They were just brought here. So they had their own difficulties to deal with, and they made it so that my brother and I didn't have to deal with too much, but there was still a lot of like Spanish was my first language. I learned English in school, like a lot of us.
Yes.
And I just saw early on, I grew up in a Chinese environment. My uncle married into the family, he's Chinese. We were all raised Mexican and Chinese. So I think that already broke down a lot of barriers. And the Chinese culture is also very different. They have, I don't know, in some ways they're much more open about how they talk about money. In
Yeah.
others, they are not. So it really
I
just
agree.
depends. Yeah.
My nieces have Chinese, and it's that where I do love that his side of the family, being able to now be exposed to that culture where I'm like, oh, we need to implant that in our own Latino
Mhm,
culture. Yeah.
mhm, and how they gift money, right? For different occasions. It's like, here is abundance for you in a little red envelope, and that's
Yeah.
what they wish for you, fortune and all that. So,
No,
that was
totally.
definitely part of my culture. So already it just taught me to be a little different from some of my other Latino friends, and I was definitely made to feel different because I did grow up in a Chinese environment. So yeah, and also my mom just said, like, look, I didn't have an opportunity to travel as much when I was younger. So every year I want to ship you to a new place. So when I was quite young, my uncle and my mom literally put me and my cousin on a plane and shipped us to China and was like, go learn
Awesome.
Mandarin, right? So I speak very broken Mandarin. I didn't keep up
You
with
and
it
I
or
will
anything.
practice. My husband and when we first started dating, I was learning Mandarin.
No
The guy
way.
actually living in Shanghai, he wanted to learn Spanish, so I was teaching him Spanish, and he was teaching me Mandarin.
That's so cool.
And it's the pinyans that are so hard to get, right? The pinyans is
Yes.
accent people, and it was just funny. Him and I would laugh half of our sessions because he couldn't get the R, the R por perro,
Yeah.
and for me it was like the pinyans. I'm like, I don't know how to say that.
Yeah, it's so difficult. And it's but it's funny, it's like it's not a difficult language to learn when you apply yourself. I
Mhm,
feel like French and Spanish are so much harder.
mhm.
Because it's very formulaic. I mean, so is every language, but that
Exactly.
one just
Feminine and
seems easier.
masculine format. Yeah.
Right, right. So yeah, I mean, that really is what exposed me to all the different cultures in the world. And I knew, I'm like, wow, I need to see more. I need to travel. I need to just absorb knowledge. And I was always a kid that read a lot. So for Christmas, I would ask for books. I just wanted to, that's the one way that I could transplant myself into other people's lives, and I felt like language was a way to break down barriers as well and just have, just share something with the culture. And it's the best way to really learn the culture because you'll never be one with it because you're not from that culture. But language
Exactly.
is a gateway to it, right?
And you just said that we can learn from that culture because I have friends that are one of my closest friends. She is Korean, brought up in a very different as far as Latinos go. But I learned so much that I'm like, oh, they start taking these classes when they're little kids instead of
Yeah.
like we were all weekend at a soccer field playing, different teams. And first she's like, oh no, we were taking math classes by the time we were 4. And
Right.
it's just like, wow, these are things we can incorporate. And my other friend who's Jewish, she's like, oh yeah, we learned about money in temple. And once before we even got married, we started taking all these classes as a couple. And it's just like, hold up, why don't we do
I
this?
know. I know. And, I guess there is something in Catholicism where they have the
Yeah.
classes you have to take before your marriage, right? But for example, it's not really forced
It's
upon
not
people.
finance.
And yeah, and I mean, my husband and I weren't married through the church, so we didn't have any exposure that way. We just kind of imposed it on ourselves to do like self couple counseling, because it's
Awesome.
important to have that discussion, but it's not easy, that's for sure.
It's not. I mean, it still isn't. I think people always assume because you and I talk about money all the time that it's easy for us, and it's not. One because we're fighting the traumatic, experiences we had as kids, or
Right.
now it's something new, a language for us. But when you bring in your partner as well, it makes it a little bit different. One of my favorite books before I got married was called it's by David Bach. It's a Smart Couples Finish Rich, and I think that was something it allowed me to just like, okay, how do I start this conversation? And luckily, my husband always was open as well. But we both there's moments where we still get uncomfortable. Like, okay, can we talk about this? Or
Yes.
how do you? I don't know if this happens, to you, especially with your home that you're updating all the time, like we are, or it's a fixer up, or you can call it. Is how do we defend the reason why we need to buy this purchase as opposed to the other purchase, right?
Right.
And we don't want to be that couple like hides it or doesn't even consult, so it's always an interesting conversation. It's not an easy one, but it needs to be
Yes.
had, right?
It is, and that's the thing. I grew up in a family where the women would hide the shoes that they bought, or keep it in the
Oh,
trunk until the
yeah,
husband wasn't looking. And it is something that I was like, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. Like I earned it, he earned it. Like we just put it all out there,
you
and
want
it's
I have no
ugly, and you
guilt, right?
cry.
Yeah,
Yeah, and it's hard, and you're like, oh my god, divorce, everything. You get so scared, right? But it's
yeah,
just fear.
yes.
And but all of that everything I've experienced in my life and the travels, and you realize that everyone has those same kind of issues.
Mhm.
um and you know um I lived in Switzerland up until 2 years ago. My husband is half French, half Swiss, so I moved to Switzerland, and that's where I really woke up to what money really means, because I had just a few $1,000s saved in my bank account. And I was like, I'll make it work. Switzerland is expensive. And, I didn't have a job. I went there thinking, oh, I'll find something so fast. I had a good title here, blah, blah. Well, no, it slapped me in the face and was like, who are you? No one cares. You don't know anyone. You can't speak.
Experience, right?
Yeah,
You're in a
I
different
had
country,
a
totally.
full on identity crisis, and thankfully my husband was so patient. He told me like, this is your opportunity to find out who you are as a person.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, guru, like what are you talking about,
True,
right?
true.
I didn't realize that I had to do that. And they have a different mindset with money too. Like debt is a very, very recent thing that they're starting to,
Mhm.
like in Mexico, starting to have, because they pay cash. They pay their people well. The society takes care of their people. So coming from America, where everything is credit card and debt and all this stuff, it was eye opening, and I'm so grateful for the experience, because I had a few things that I had to overcome,
Mhm.
and it really helped me to understand when we came back to the U.S. what we didn't want and how to set up our goals. And even now, we're still working on like, how do we want to invest? What do we want to do next? And what about the
Yeah.
business? All
It
sorts of
keeps
things. So,
changing. It keeps changing. It's funny you mentioned, cash, right? Or I would say argent, right? Am I saying? Yeah, I would say
awesome, awesome.
argent, right? I remember the first time I went to Paris. Well, it was actually I was in Paris first because I lived in Spain, and it was not the euro yet, right? And so when I went back and actually lived and studied in France, it was now having to convert everything to the euro. And so
Right.
all of a sudden I saw the devalue of the dollar and I'm like, whoa, it's going to be more expensive. You took the time you're a risk taker, obviously, to do that. And I love that story about you because I think that's something people need to hear. It is really scary when you're out of your comfort zone. You have no idea. I had no idea how Americanized I was until I lived,
Right.
right? You live into another country and you're like, whoa, I had no
Yeah.
idea that people either perceive us like this or and obviously you and I, we look Latina too, so that
Yeah.
makes them a little
Very,
confused.
very
And,
confused. Very
but
confused.
I go, we're dual. I go, we are American, and yet we're also from wherever country we're from as well, right? And so it's having to have that identity crisis of like, how do I say who I am? But also, I think it's beautiful when you look at some of these countries that are extremely similar to what we just have to adapt. We have to learn the language literally. Um,
Or at least try, right? Like
yeah,
in Switzerland, where I was, it's the German speaking side. They have a dialect there. So the official language is German, but they have a Swiss dialect. You're never going to learn it like
yes,
perfectly because you weren't born there, but you can at least try. And that
yes.
already they're like, oh, you're American, but you're trying? Okay. That's cool.
Yes,
You
and
know?
you're investing. That's what it is.
Mhm.
You're investing your time, your money as well, literally, right?
Right.
'Cause you're risking everything. And invest is also very similar to Spanish, right? Invertir. It's actually in French is
Invertir. Yeah.
invertir, right? Invertir. You have the N.
And that's what's so hard because if you speak Spanish and you speak French, I constantly mix words up. And my mother-in-law is just like, that's not how we say it in French. I'm like, yes, it is. But she's like, I'm French. I know it's not.
I remember just walking the streets and, these are small little towns. And when I'd say something, I'm like, parle français, parle anglais. And then you're like, español, like, anything. You're just like, do you understand what I'm saying? And the word,
Yeah.
they come and jumble up in your head. And I
Yeah.
think a lot about when it comes to money, our financial literacy is it does get overwhelming because some words sound similar. They almost sound like sometimes they have the same purpose. Like there's a difference between compounding interest, difference between an interest, and people are like, "Oh, is it interest that I want on my credit card to be high?" I'm like, "No, no, it's the opposite." But when you're investing, you want your interest to be great, a return on investment, right? And so, it's always interesting to see how we can incorporate the two. We can talk forever, but we're going to keep it under
Yep.
20. I just wanted people to be introduced to who you are, how you're going to be part of this podcast as well, since we have some.
Super excited.
Yeah, me
Thank
too. Having other, speakers and some amazing, and just hearing their stories because a lot of them are self-millionaires, first generation, and being able to highlight what they're doing, especially during pandemic. A lot of us are pivoting. A lot of us are
Yes.
working and focusing on what has worked in the past. So I'm excited to get you part of that. And for those that are going to be showing up to our Make Money Moves a Millionaire, it's going to be a virtual event this year. Fortunately, last year we had it was an amazing spot in LA, right? The view was just
It
breathtaking.
was. It
And
was.
had professional photos being taken, and because a lot of people don't have professional headshots. So I'm like, dude, if you want people to take you seriously, have these are things that you invest in. So that was part of inclusion. But I am so proud to be part of this with you. I look forward to talking about our adventures and interviews.
Yes.
From the Financially Savvy in 20 Minutes team, sending gratitude to veterans and their families. Thank you.
To learn more about the podcast, check out financiallysavvyin20minutes.com. For more interviews, make sure you look up Financially Savvy in 20 Minutes on YouTube and Instagram TV. To hire the Trailblazer, as Forbes featured her the financial and mental health advocate for your next workshop or speaking engagement, follow Natalie at Financially Savvy Latina on all social platforms. All it takes is 20 minutes daily to become financially savvy. Music by Nikki and produced by Robert DeLude.